Good afternoon, everybody. This is Cornelia Rand, Rugby Coffee Podcast. This is a Sunday. This is a good day. It's a weekend. There you go. And then we've got some Rugby Coffee going. But it's a weekend where MLR started in the USA and Canada. It is a weekend where it was Super Saturday in the Six Nations. Obviously, there's Super Rugby down in Australia and New Zealand. Some quality games there, but as a very good, weekend. There's one more game for the MLR to play today, and I know our guest today. That's his team, Nola Gold. They're playing against Old Glory DC. So that's a great game coming up later on. We can tell you all about MLR in a minute. But let me introduce to you one third, I would say, of the podcast that's very popular in the USA and Canada, the Rugby Rant Podcast. It's an MLR podcast. It focuses on the North American game. But I can only introduce Rob The Hammer Hammerschmidt, and he can tell us a little bit more. But welcome, Rob. It's really nice to have you on this show.
Thank you so much for having me, Corne. It's been a treat, first of all, to work with Rugby Coffee. It's like rugby is a passion and coffee is a passion for you. Both are passions for me as well. So it's a partnership made in heaven.
There you go. Let's go.
Absolutely.
Toast on that.
Cheers.
Yes. No, it's good because people won't probably know, but we got to speak to you guys, and knowing that we are introducing our coffee around the world. Eventually we're going to be in the US and Canada, and we liked the podcast, and we sort of started talking, and then it came about that we can do a bit of sponsorship with you guys and get the word out. And for people who don't know, these guys are very animated on their podcast because they're very passionate about what they're talking about, and there's rugby in North America and seeing that game grow. Now, they got us on board and said, look, we are happy to have your coffee on our podcast and as a sponsor. So we are happy to supply, the Rugby Rant podcast with the coffee. But what is Rugby Coffee? If people don't know, listening for the first time, it is about great coffee, great people, bringing them together to make a difference. And where do we make a difference is where we have a big passion for is the kids in rugby. The kids who don't necessarily get the opportunity. Kids who potentially won't have ability to pay for it, their parents, that kind of thing. Kids in countries that might not see this kind of thing on their doorstep or offer to them. That's where we're about. Now, if we have great coffee and people believe in it and they drink it and they buy it, we then can go and support these causes. And we partner with Bubesi Pride was our first charity partner. They're UK-based, but they go out in Africa, and they've been going out there since 2011, doing fantastic work. Go check them out online and see what they do. We also started just with a partnership in BC or in Canada. It's the Grassroots Rugby Foundation, fantastic, as part of the Canadian Rugby Foundation. We've got a foundation or a charity that we are partnering up. We just got to get the final paperwork done. Hopefully it's going soon. In the USA as well, doing fantastic work for a number of years now in the USA. So we're excited about this, and we want to make a difference. And that's what this is about. And why the podcast? So we can talk about it. We can talk about rugby at all levels, how we can grow it, how we can sort of make sure that we promote what we do, but also promote the game, and then people can get involved. So, and the US and Canada is a market that loves their coffee, first of all. And then second of all, the rugby there that's established, but, they want to grow it even more and make it one of the mainstream sports, really. So that's why we do it, and and that's why the Rugby Rant is sort of we involved with them in terms of sponsoring them. So how's the coffee, first of all, from your side?
Oh, absolutely fabulous. I got to be honest with you. So not to jump too far ahead in the conversation, but I do have a coffee routine every morning. It's the common access to common coffees here in the United States that almost on a morning basis are the quick and easy, but the most enjoyable coffee experience I have are with RugbyCoffee. Getting up, grinding the beans, having the opportunity to take the extra couple minutes to go through that process and brew a fresh cup of coffee is absolutely phenomenal. And I love this brand. It's the crowd favorite, right?
Favorite. Yeah, we sent you guys the crowd's favorite, which is a medium roast. One of the two first roasts that we're going to introduce here with you guys in the US and Canada. So I'm glad because we've got a fantastic, a advisor, coffee industry advisor, somebody who's helping us with getting this right. We got the profile right in the UK. We changed it slightly for the US, for the the North American market. And you guys have something special because this guy knows his coffee and knows how to brew it and how to roast it. So we are very lucky to have that. So first of all, the product's good. So I'm glad you like it. But let's just go into what we're going to talk about. I've got my paper here and I've got my questions, and let's talk rugby podcasts. There's plenty of rugby podcasts now out there, especially since COVID started. There's more that came. Our business started in COVID. The idea started before COVID, but the business then got a push into that, and we knew podcast is a way to sort of promote what we do and promote rugby as a game. So there's so many. You guys are one of the more popular ones out there. Now, When did you guys start? Why did you start it? And what's the format of your podcast?
Great questions. Well, we're coming up on our first anniversary, April 16th. We'll earmark the first a year since we started the podcast. It actually started because we all dabbled a little bit in the media marketplace in one way or another. Ty Baraga was, of course, the voice, the on-field presence voice of the Colorado Raptors in the MLR. He did some of their games in the COVID-shortened season. Scott Ferrara is responsible for running a Rooney supporters group called Rooster Boosters. Again, he does a podcast piece. And then myself, I had a YouTube channel called Hammer Rugby, where I covered and focused on the MLR, colored a little in with Nola Gold. So under COVID, we were going online back and forth on Ty's MLR fan zone page about Bastareaud and whether or not he was worth the weight and the expense that Rooney put into getting him to come to the United States. And Scott and I were friendly banter, but we were going back and forth. My sense was, of those big 3 or 4 players, including Nonu and Ranger and, Tundai, and of course, Bastareaud. Of those 4, who would you have picked first if you had the option of building a team and bringing in one of those players? And I said, he might be the last on that list. And Scott took offense to that, of course, because he's a Rooney supporter. And quite frankly and honestly, he watched Bastareaud on a regular basis. So he probably had legitimately a bit more context than I did. But it created a conversation. Ultimately, Ty said, boy, this would make a great show. And being that everybody was Zooming or Google Meeting or whatever we were doing, we thought we could make a show out of this. And that's where the Rugby Rant, it was originally the MLR Rant, but that's where the Rugby Rant was born. And we've developed it since. And it is a very tight marketplace for sure. But I think we give a lot of thought to providing a avenue for fans. We have fan polls that generate our conversations. We always ask for fan input. We bring fans on our show on a weekly basis. The fans that are most engaged, we ask them to come on. We also want to seek to find out who the fans want us to interview in terms of personalities and faces in the MLR. And so we really look to be a fan-driven podcast. And I think that's what distinguishes us from a lot of the podcasts that are out there in the MLR particularly. So hopefully on that model, we can be sustainable. And I think other podcasts will die off. They'll lose their energy. But I think those premise will keep us going. And ultimately, we're trying to go rugby one fan at a time. That's our motto. And that, I think, perfectly aligns with Rugby Coffee, because we're both about developing the next generation.
No, for sure. And you sort of allude to why you started it, and that is probably the reason, that fan, that one fan at a time, growing the game, getting them engaged. And I've been really enjoying your show, and certainly all the different, different people you get involved. The fan engagement is massive. The fans is the glue of everything, Yeah. It has to be. And if you put the fan first, you're going to get to a good product. You're going to get a loyal product or loyal customer, and your product's going to grow. Now, our podcast is obviously very amateurish and very low key, but we know what we're trying to do with it. And so what have you guys learned in this time? You've been doing it, because it's been growing, and then the production of it is really getting better and better. And you guys are putting something out there that people really enjoy, and, it looks professional as well.
So I think we've always tried to reach out a little bit more along every step of the way. There have been some periods throughout this last year that have really been cornerstone moments for us. Probably the one that sticks out the most is in August, after we realized that A, we were sustainable, and B, we had something that people liked and wanted to see more of. And so at that point, we really gave a lot more thought to getting better interviews. And we developed, by the way, a following. I think our first interview was Nick Feeks. Nick Feeks is from Australia, but he went to Lindenwood University, where my son goes. And so I had a relationship with Nick. We brought him on, and he plays for NOLA. And of course, I think that gave it some legitimacy. Of course, Dallin Stanford, which you're familiar with, he was on one of our first rant shows, and that gave us some legitimacy. So I think at that point, we really developed a following. We developed a reputation amongst players that we were a group that could be trusted, that they could share information with us, that perhaps they wanted to keep close to the vest, but it would provide context for a better conversation, more appropriate for a greater fan engagement. And I think then in December, January, we hit one of those other cornerstone moments where we began to reach out to partners. And so August was the rugbyshop.com, of course. And then we started having conversations with Rugby Coffee, with Tighthead Brewing, which is here in Chicago. And then, of course, with Manscaped. And so we really felt like we were growing our partnerships, and that was a good piece. Once we started to do that, we really started to think about the production value and giving our sponsors more cleaner production value, and taking up that podcast, which was very, grassroots and very homegrown, to something that's a little bit more polished. And we're still looking at how we can do that. One of the things we're considering doing is trying to figure out how we can take imagery and graphics from games and do some analysis and bring that to the fans. So they may see the game and watch the game, but may not necessarily see the game necessarily in the way that somebody who has eyes on and who's been experienced watching the game might do it. So again, that's growing rugby one fan at a time, having, like my mate loves sports, but may not understand rugby, being able to see a clip or two and they say, okay, now I see where they created this overlap in space, or they created a gap. That's kind of on the horizon for us. So that's an example of just how we're looking to extend our podcast, go beyond our reach, use a bit more technology, and develop it to begin to grow the game and make it more accessible for all fans, those who are experienced and well-heeled in rugby, and those who are just new to the game.
Yeah, I mean, you've got that part where you can educate, and then the other part that people can really engage with and add their opinion to because they have that experience. And those two things can meet, and that means the education goes through the roof around, and you guys are going to make that change, and you're going to add value in terms of the education around the game, But it's fantastic. I must say, I must congratulate you guys. You've got quite a few thousands logging in, watching it, if not when it's going live or published later on, because it's on Facebook. Yes, you can see it on Facebook. Yep. Can you see it on YouTube as well?
Yeah, so we go live with our weekly interviews on Facebook. We're going to be switching from Wednesdays from this last week when we had Commissioner Kilbrew on. We're going to be going to Mondays. JT Onyet from the president of the Sabercats will be on. We're going to have Todd Clever on here in a couple of weeks, of course, the Captain America, if you will. He's going to be on as well. So we're moving to Mondays to capitalize on making it more convenient for players and administrators in the MLR. Usually Monday is a bit of a more relaxed day, recovery day, makes it easier for them to get access rather than being in that high intensity, training environment, kind of take advantage of that. And I think it comes off the heels of the weekend's events and games. So we can really ask some of those, be one of the first podcasts to ask some of those tough questions of coaches and players, after they've played the game. And so that gives, again, it's all about the fan experience now. So that's one of the pieces, but we're available on, YouTube. We're available on all major media platforms, Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, etc. Scott's been working really hard to develop our social media presence on some of the other platforms, including TikTok and, Instagram. And of course, we're very accessible, and that's the other piece. We want any fan to be able to engage with us in any way that they can. Sorry, my dog's in the background.
It's amazing because you that's fun. I send my kids out, so otherwise I knew. But it's that sort of things that's so important. The TikTok, for instance, the younger market, etc., etc. You got to be engaging in those places, especially if we're going to grow a fan at a time, because we can get to it in a bit later when we talk development in rugby. But if you start them young or get their interest young, that's where you're going to win. So any fun stories in this time that you almost a year now that you've been going that just brings to mind, that just makes that's going down as legendary,
There are a few that stick out. One happened just this last week. A really good one is Robert Remiscu, who's an American-based player, played for Penn State. He's with Rooney, real good mates with Scott, of course, because their contacts through Rooney. Remiscu came on. We were going to record it, and then we're going to release it right around Christmas because we knew we'd have a little bit of lull and access to players and give ourselves a little bit of a break there around the holidays and provide our family with a little bit more of our attention. So Rob came on, and at one point, he was trying to change the camera angle, and his phone fell off the table, and there was a whole, his whole knock on sort of thing. But it was kind of comedic relief. And so we actually did a best of episode over that winter break, right around Christmas time, where we just took some funny clips and edits and kind of put them together. And we as hosts talked about why we selected those particular pieces. This week, I think much to Scott's chagrin, I'm cutting out a piece where I was at the heart of the blooper, if you will. So another player that played for Rooney and is a good mate of Scott's is Mikey Brown. He was a hooker. He played for Rooney, and then he was picked up in a supplemental draft with Dallas. Well, of course, we know the story that somewhere in the roundabouts January, Dallas dropped out of this year's play even after the schedule was made, and Mikey had already moved with his wife down to Dallas. And as a matter of fact, he got, to tie back into some of our conversation later, he actually got a job with Dallas Jesuit, coaching Dallas Jesuit's rugby team. So he had a job already. He had made commitments to be a high school coach. And so I felt terrible for the man. Here he is, he ups, he moves his family, his fiance, all the way down to Dallas. And then things fall apart on the rugby side for him. And he's committed to being a coach. So I said to him off camera, I said, Rob, can I support you guys in any way? Can I buy some merch or something to throw a few pounds your way? And he said, yeah, as a matter of fact, we're going to have our merch sales here. So I bought a shirt and I said, I'll throw you guys a shout out on our podcast to make sure everybody knows about Dallas Jesuit and about your role with them, because I think, again, it's kind of my spirit of really celebrating the youth game, because that's where it starts. That's where the passion can be grown into the next generation of Eagle here in the United States. So as I was throwing a shout out this last week, I had forgotten that Mikey was no longer with Rooney, that he was with now Dallas, and it will be delayed by a year. And I had kind of chided Scott to say, hey, not only do I have the shirt, but I'm going to see Mikey Brown next weekend as I'm going down to watch Dallas play Rooney. And he's like, yeah, well, you can't be that good of a friend of his, because you don't even know that he's not playing in New York anymore as a Dallas. And I completely, yeah. And then the thing that followed me up is I was actually going to go to Dallas, see Nola play Dallas actually the weekend after, in the third week. So I would have seen him, and it just, in my 50-year-old mind, us old boys have taken a few knocks to the head, and we sometimes forget. Either that or our kids drive us to forget things. I'm not sure which. Nevertheless, he chided me, and it turned out to be a blooper. But I cut it out for this week's podcast, so those folks that are watching here will know what to look for.
We'll refer it back to this one, yeah. But look, it happens. Last week we did a podcast with Dallin Stanford and Joe Harvey. Joe Harvey is a journalist, a rugby journalist in the UK. With he's got Canadian sort of heritage and
roots. Yeah, Joe was actually on our podcast about a month and a half ago.
Yes, he mentioned, but he's fantastic in terms of writing, looking at the MLR, and Darren obviously fantastic what he does. But that was our first video sort of recording. All the others were audio. Now everything went well, and afterwards, everything, putting it together, the post production, and all I could see is a green screen on my end. Their two screens are perfect, but my screen's green. So it had to be, that was not our first video one anymore. So this one is our first video one, just to put you under pressure.
There we go.
But you've done it many times before. That's awesome. Look, Rob, let's talk about you. Where did you play your rugby, and where did you get involved? And where are you involved?
Yeah, I think my story in rugby is unique to rugby, not necessarily unique to American rugby. I came, like many Americans of my generation, I'm almost 50, of my generation, they come to the game in their 20s. Some of them come to the game in their college. And so I came to the game actually after I started teaching. I was teaching in Lamont, Illinois, which is a southwest suburb of Chicago. I had a student whose mom came to parent-teacher night, and Roanne Rebenson, shout out to Ro. She has a mouth like a trucker and could handle herself on any wharf or any dock that you could find anywhere in the world. She's a tough lady, and she says, you look pretty athletic. Do you do anything? And I said, well, I play, flag football, being the typical American. And she says, you know what, that's sports for wally woofers or whatever we want to say. She used an American term, and I'll keep that out of the podcast to keep it PG-13.
Yeah.
And she said, you need to try rugby. And so at 24 years of age, I saw that as a challenge. And so I come from a wrestling background, an American football background, and I thought, okay, I'll give it a shot. And from the moment I stepped on the pitch, I felt a camaraderie. I truly felt like I'd found something sporting-wise that fit me. And from there, I always felt a desire to try to provide young people with that same feeling that I got, and hopefully give it to them at a younger age so that they can grow and develop. And probably the beacon for me has been the tutelage of my own son, who started playing at a young age at grade 5 here, about, say 11 years old. Now he's in college and has been very successful. And so I'm hoping that through promotion of the Rugby Rant and through really spreading the game and being involved in touching into the MLR and being involved in Chicago rugby, that we can help make more kids like my son grow and become fascinated and fall in love with a wonderful and beautiful game of rugby. So, I played men's club for about 10 years. And then when my own kids started to get involved, I joined with some other people that I knew. A lot of folks here in the Chicago area, a lot of guys that I played with started their own clubs because their children were getting of age to play rugby as well. And so that's where I got more involved with the youth game and promotion of the youth game. And have been involved in high school and junior high and in some of the select sides here and around the Chicago area. And there might be some adventures on the horizon that you might hear about somewhere down the road potentially, in which I'll hopefully be able to have an influence on the growth of the youth game here in Chicago.
Amazing. No, I got some, goose flesh, just totally. That is what rugby is about. You got there your first time you got into the environment, you were sort of hooked, and that is testament to what the grassroots, the values, etc. of the game sort of teaches you and provides, So, and what position did you play? Can I try and guess? Because I haven't heard anywhere else, but I would think it's either hooker or flanker.
You're pretty close. I started off in the second row.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm 6'2", not super tall, but we had a very mobile pack. So we really prided ourselves to be able to get around the pitch. I prided myself to be in very, very mobile, very fit. And I was easy to lift, so I could really contest a lot of lineouts in the defensive side of a lineout. And I was mobile enough to go forward and back in the line out and really allow it actually saved our props some of the energy through the duration of the game, that they didn't have to lift this heavy 240-pound guy. It was, 210, 215, a little bit more mobile. And then I eventually, as I adapted to the game and learned the game, I went to the back row and played open side flanker. Yeah. Still stayed in the line out, though. That was a point of pride for me, is I was a flanker, usually the first jumper, and it was I kind of took control of that position and really I really embraced being in the line out, embraced winning line out, really wanted to make that a mainstay of my game because I thought it was an important platform to disrupt the opposition's ball and to gain control of our ball to set a platform for moving forward.
A very technical part, the line out.
Yeah.
So, no, brilliant, Rob. Your nickname is the Hammer. Scott Ferreira is the big guy. I don't know what Ty's is.
I'm
still
Safa.
Wondering.
He's the
Safa. Okay, yeah, of course. There you go. No, brilliant. Now let's go MLR. MLR. I'm pretty tired because I stayed up till very late last night. In the morning hours, just trying to look at all these games, see what it's like through the Rugby Network app, and, obviously the one game that I was really interested in first off was the Giltinis against the Free Jacks. The reason was Dallin Stanford is a brand ambassador for RugbyCoffee. He was calling that game. He was commentating on that. Plus, DTH, who was on your podcast the other day, he's also a brand ambassador for us. And how amazing was it? DTH first try for LA Giltinis in the MLR, DTH van der Merwe. And the second. And he could have had a third.
Yeah.
But, and then he was man of the match as well. And he got mentioned a few times, and RugbyCoffee was mentioned as well. So for me, that was fantastic. But just the whole hype, the whole year without the rugby, the shortened last year, and then getting into it now, building it up. It was exciting to just see what the production is going to be like, what MLR is doing through their app, what the Rugby Network's doing, and it's free as well for anybody that wants to go and have a look. And I'm sure you can watch the games back. I haven't looked at that, but it's fantastic. And yes, the level of the game will develop. With COVID, it's not easy as well, with no fans there. Some games there were some fans, but I can see, for instance, that Colosseum. Imagine you've got that half full.
Oh.
The teams that arrive there will have a place that the stage is amazing. Then to be able to play in that stage where all those American sports have played quality, and Olympics was there and will be there again, I think, that's exciting. And then apart from that, all the other parts of where you can go to, in MLR, the different states, different towns, quite exciting. So what was your first take on this first weekend so far? I know NOLA hasn't played yet, but
yeah, they play this afternoon. I'll be glued to my television here very shortly. I thought it was interesting, the dichotomy that we saw this weekend on the actual website itself, the Rugby Network. On one hand, we set up a watch party with one of our sponsors, Tighthead Brewing. I went up there, it's here in Chicago, and we watched the San Diego game. They played Rooney. Now, San Diego was, of course, playing all their home games in Las Vegas. And so the actual broadcast of all the camera angles was not super great. They didn't have permanent posts. And so, and this isn't a criticism. I think this is a reflection of the growing pains of the league and the growing pains of COVID, of having to learn to adapt to COVID. It looked a little amateurish. Right. It reminded me a little bit of some of what I might see if I'm trying to watch some of the college games being broadcast here in the United States. But again, I think that's a product of both the fact that they had to play at a venue that they're not accustomed playing in, and the fact that that's the first weekend and they haven't quite sorted out some of those details, that things had to be brought together rather late. Normally, when San Diego plays in Torero Stadium in San Diego, it's a beautiful production. The camera angles are wonderful. The stadium is wonderful. It's really a nice, quaint stadium. It really has a lot of value to watch as a consumer of rugby, to watch the game on TV when it's at Torero. Consequently, on the other side of the coin, going to the LA Coliseum, I think you saw the majesty of what could be, for example, a final in 2031 for World Cup. If it comes to North America, one of those venues that you could really envision seeing being completely filled. The pitch was perfect. The venue was absolutely pristine. The only thing it lacked was fans. But the camera angles were brilliant. I think it really provided a great production value. And I got to say, for guys that played on that pitch on that day, it had to have been an exhilarating feeling for a guy like DTH to do something historic in a historic stadium. It was really brilliant to watch. Thoroughly impressed. So I'm glad Gilchrist put that together and was able to get it there. I don't care what anybody says. Yes, 70,000 fans, and it will look a little empty initially in their first couple games. But if they do the camera angles right, I think they can still make an impressive product. So this first weekend, I think it's going to be seen as success to be able to be without rugby for a year. There are going to be bumps in the road. There's going to be no doubt about that. There are going to be bumps in the road. We've already seen our first. NOLA's game got pushed from yesterday to today. But to see games continue to go off and to see fans, what I think fans will be back in the stadiums in bigger and bigger numbers as COVID restrictions are lifted. I just hope we get to that. We're able to get to that final and see a wonderful product come off on August 1st. And that'll be a celebration for sure.
Yeah, I heard George Killebrew, the commissioner, saying, if we get to the 1st of August and have that final, that will be a celebration in itself. But yeah, from my point of view, I agree with you. Looking at and you got to take all of these factors that you just mentioned in consideration. But it's exciting to see that there is that interest, and that somebody like the commissioner has got a very good idea how to get that product out there. And there's 12 teams currently. There will be teams added to this to sort of serve different areas of the States and Canada. And I can just see that this going to turn out to be a league that a lot of teams want to come and play. Now, the Americans are not used to cricket or anything like that, but cricket's got their 2020 or their IPL in Indian Premier League, and a lot of top players go and play that league, and they come back and play for their province or their home team or whatever it is. I can see that happening potentially in the MLR, and I can also see that happening in terms of just the league becoming that rugby-tainment that it's been thrown about that term, because the Americans do it differently than anywhere else in the world. And that might be an attraction. And that's where I think it will become quite a different, something different for rugby fans to sort of engage with. Do you agree with me on that, or do you see it taking a longer time to get there? Or
I agree with you in that you've got to make the experience, especially for new fans that don't know rugby. Look, you and I can go to Twickenham, or we can go to Ellis Park, or we can go to any major rugby venue in the world, and I guarantee you, we'll enjoy the day, because we know how to do that. We know how we want to take it all in and consume it and experience it. As I said, I'm going down to NOLA next weekend. I guarantee you, my guy, Benjamin Haswell, he will be helping me experience and take it all in. But for the new rugby fan, you want to give them a door-to-door experience from the time they leave their driveway to the time that they return. You want them to have that moment where they come back and say, that was brilliant. There was something for everybody. When they take their wives, their children, of course, the men or women that play rugby will enjoy the rugby and look to take that piece all in. But it's your spouse and it's your children that also got to have a part and an experience for them to enjoy, for them to want to come back and say, you know what, we want to be season ticket holders next year, because for 8 games a season, 8 weekends a season, we're going to thoroughly enjoy our experience. Or maybe let's take a trip to another venue. When things open up, go up. For me, it would be driving 8 hours to Toronto and taking in an Arrows game, or taking my family. We were going to go down to NOLA, drive down to NOLA. Myself and my wife and my 2 kids. We're going to drive down to NOLA. Some things got in the way, but the idea that we want that experience to be something that even non-rugby playing folks thoroughly enjoy. And so it's all about rugby-tainment, right? You go there, there's a concert happening, there's, some touch rugby for the kids to have a little bit of fun before they go. There's the merchandising that, wives are looking at, women specific, custom cut T-shirts and jerseys and earrings and, all those pieces, so that everybody has something that they come away with going, I want that again because it was great. And so it's going to take time. There's no doubt it will take time to grow in the United States. But I've always said that you've got to start with your rugby core first. If you have a franchise, start with the people that know rugby, make it good for them, bring them in, invite them, make it something that they love, that they have a bond with. This team is my team, like I have with NOLA, right? And then you build out from there. So their friends, they bring their friends. And now their friends who weren't necessarily rugby folks, they go, yeah, I like what this team is selling. I like the experience and love and enjoy it. And then other people hear about it. They may not have a tie to rugby, but they've heard about that experience and they want to engage in that experience too. And so it's all about building from that core concentrically out to where you get the city and the people of the city to buy in to what you are doing on the pitch and off the pitch alike.
No, for sure. And I think America has got that understanding of how to do it. There's now obviously MLR rugby is competing with these amazing American sports that's so mainstream, but your experience of rugby, getting involved in it, and then, a rugbytainment now potentially giving other people that experience. And, I can see it happening. But, like you say, it will take time. But, it's an exciting one. And I think it's one, if a World Cup can get to the US, it will come at the right time. And then it will hopefully push rugby a little bit further. And we know everybody speaks about it. But what games that stood out for you? You mentioned earlier games you watched.
So I watched the Rooney San Diego game. I think it was to be expected. It was a little bit sloppy. There were periods where you saw some good levels of play. I think there were some other periods where I saw the ball being thrown around a little bit too much, and thought to myself, just take the ball up, go forward, allow your support to come and provide the next phase of play, rather than trying to throw the ball and make something exciting happen. I think, with the MLR, it's not, we're not, comparatively, by the way, compared to the Six Nations, the defenses aren't as tight, obviously. As you go up to international play, the defenses get far more tight, right? And that's perhaps, I think that's actually a silver lining in the MLR, right? Because it can provide that new person can come and watch a game that doesn't understand why you kick a ball high in the air and run up under it, or you kick for territory. They don't necessarily understand that. But what they do understand is when there's that brilliant break or that nice combination play that allows to spring somebody through a gap. And because the defenses aren't quite as tight in the MLR, at least right now in its early, fourth year, it does provide a lot of entertainment value. So I thought I really thought San Diego would be a bit stronger at the set piece. They, of course, were missing Peterson, Joe Peterson, an amazing number 10 from South Africa. He's played 15 in a couple games last year. And of course, they were missing Rob Shaw. So I thought they would win that game. But with those two playmakers out, I think it really demonstrated why, a couple key players can make all the difference in your run of play. And then I watched a bit of the LA game with New England. I thought I saw a difference there of just how, when you bring just two people with over 220 caps to their name, the difference that they can make in the quality of play, even, and no disrespect to them, even as long in the tooth as those guys are, right? And then, of course, you put a DTH in there who's still kind of has some rugby legs left in him, just what his experience and maturity with the game, what kind of difference that can make. And then they have a lot of MLR guys that are well-heeled in the MLR that, of course, are good players in their own right. And what I really like seeing is a shout out to my guy, Roddy, Christian Rodriguez. He came from LU product, and he's an LA product too. He's one of those guys where I think can be an excellent ambassador for the MLR because he is from LA. He's actually coaches youth programs in LA. He's a segment of the population I think MLR needs to reach out to. The Hispanic, players, Hispanic youth. I think we can, the league and the teams need to really, and the youth programs need to find a way to get into the African-American communities to spread it, because it is still, it's still to some degree seen as a game played, by white guys. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity to bring this game to a lot of other cultural groups in the United States. And Roddy's a great example of that. He's a champion, man. So I like to see him get an opportunity to play at the end of the game there on that big, huge Coliseum stage.
For sure. Was there any players that, I know it was sometimes sloppy, even the Free Jacks LA game, later on, it's to be understood, they haven't played for such a long time.
Right.
Coming back into it, and different environment with COVID around, etc. It's totally different, so it will take time. It took time with the guys back here in the UK playing top level rugby. They get them back into their game, so you would understand that, so but was there any guys apart from him that sort of caught your eye that you haven't really sort of seen play or seen developed, or just caught you by surprise,
Uh, and I only caught the last probably 25 or 30 minutes of that match because it started half an hour after the match that we were featuring at our watch party. Obviously, I saw the highlights, and you can't say enough about the experience that they put on the field. I really kind of keep my eye on some of the young guys because here's an example. In the first game that I watched, Saul Mooching scored a try. I think he may have scored the first try for San Diego. But Saul's a mainstay at San Diego. He's a young guy. He's an American. He played American football. He's one of those guys I think that represents where some levels of development are reaching out towards those crossover athletes. He had played, of course, in his youth, so he was not unfamiliar with rugby as a game. But he's the kind of player that I think Americans would really latch onto. He's from Hawaii, so he's got Polynesian culture. He's a flank. He's a strapping lad. He's got a nice combination of size, speed, aggressiveness. And it's, again, he's one of those players I think we should celebrate in the league for American fans because I think they'll identify with, his roots and his background and the kind of tough, physical, hard-nosed play that he represents. So I like watching Psalm, and I really wish I could have seen Joe Peterson and Rob Shaw out there because it would have been nice to see them. Of course, Nate Osberger, he's been around for a long time, U.S. Eagle. I liked watching him. So those are the couple guys that
he's going to play.
You mean for the U.S.? Nate? Are you talking about Peterson? That's
it. Nate
Osberger?
Is he going to play sevens first, and then will he come back into Free Jacks, or will that be just him finish the sport? After
Nate Osberger played 15s for San Diego. He started yesterday at 9.
Okay.
So he will probably be in the Eagles mix if they indeed play England and the British Irish Lions midsummer. I think you'll see him in the mix. I don't know if it'll be in a starting role or not because I think they've been grooming Ruben de Haas, who plays actually for the Cheetahs. They've been grooming him at the scrum half position. So he's another young guy that I like to watch. It'd be nice to see him back, come to the MLR for sure. But obviously, he's playing the Pro 14 is a pretty good place to be for a young guy. It's good to see Nate still playing. He took a little bit of a knock there in mid game, but continued on. So his physical toughness I think shone through there.
Awesome. Now look, let's go further into the game in the US and Canada.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the time now, but your take on where the US and Canada is at the moment with their development, their roots, their coaching development, rugby at school level, women's, girls rugby, rugby potentially in the universities and at club level. Where do you see? I mean, the game has been established in the North America for a long time, but where do you see the game at the moment, and where can you see the game USA Rugby, Canada Rugby can have easy gains in terms of engaging them early or bringing people to the game?
I think it's just two very different stories with Rugby Canada and USAR.
Sure.
I think, and what's interesting is, U.S. has gotten the better, as far as at the international level, has gotten the better of Rugby Canada here in the last couple of years. Having said that, I think that Rugby Canada is developing in their pathway in a little better place than the USAR is right now. Jamie Cudmore is heading up. Of course, he was an international for Canada, a hard man. If there are hard men left, he's still one of them. But he's heading up their development program out in the West, out in BC area, and really doing a lot of good things. We had him on our show in December. So I think they've got some systems in place for Rugby Canada to really help Rugby Canada grow. So if the United States doesn't get themselves into position soon, you could see that tables turn for a couple of years, that Rugby Canada could get the best of USA rugby at the international level. USA are, of course, coming out of bankruptcy. I think that's hampering their ability to do some things in growing the game. The only advantage is that there's obviously with 11 and next year 12 teams and potentially more in the United States, the MLR is really picking up some of the efforts to develop the game and to bring along the next generation of players. And I think we have to be cautious that we don't put it all on A, USAR, and B, the MLR teams. I think to do that would be short-sighted. It would relieve guys like me of our responsibility to grow the game. They're providing some platforms. I think it's the responsibility of the grassroots level for former players, dads who had played, moms who had played, to develop those grassroots programs, using, of course, the tools that are available when presented in the MLR. So, obviously with MLR teams being where they're at, there's a lot of tools and resources to draw upon, right? And the MLR has actually fostered that with providing incentives for teams to develop academies and to develop their youth academies and high school academies and to develop their youth programs, right? But like in the Midwest where I'm at, there isn't an MLR presence yet. So we've still got to develop that. We've got to provide the infrastructure. USAR can't do it. There's no MLR presence yet. So we have to take up that mantle. We have to take up that fire and move it forward. I think one of the keys is institutionalization, right? We've got to get rugby into the schools, touch rugby into the PE programs, and really start to develop and get kids in on rugby early. Because once they get to high school, this is what I found in my experience. Once they get to high school, a lot of American football coaches force kids to choose. And it's not just choose between rugby and football. It's choose between football, American football, and whatever other sport they're playing. So they unfortunately, they don't like to share their players. They don't like to share their athletes. They like to have those athletes in their programs lifting weights and doing all their off-season workouts and things like that throughout the whole year. They want to have a monopoly on their athletes. And of course, we're drawing from some of the same types of players. And quite frankly, we need to figure out how to get our kids, those players, interested in rugby early on so they begin to say, no, we're going to play both sports. And that's okay. I think we have an opportunity with the women's game, actually, because the way I see it, in the schools, girls play volleyball or they cheerlead in the fall. Some play some golf, some play some tennis, some do some swimming. There are other sports, but your real physical sports in the fall are cheerleading from the lifting and the tumbling and the flexibility and the gymnastics component, and then volleyball, of course, because you get your height, you get your physical, toughness. Volleyball athletes are year-round athletes, and then not all cheerleaders really have that ingrained, physical toughnness. So I think we have a gap there in the fall to really attract some girls that are athletic, that are physically, well suited for rugby, to give them something to do in the fall sports that they may not be able to get from some of the other sports that are there and available, institutionally speaking. And by the way, I think that's a reflection of the fact that at the college level, the NCAA has endorsed women's rugby, and it has not yet picked up men's rugby. So I think that's again, the Title IX piece in the United States is critical, right? Because then we can start to balance out our sports that we have at the high school and even middle school level and the collegiate level with providing, another women's sport for girls to engage in. So I think those are areas and opportunities for growth.
Am I right in saying that there's not many university or college sort of programs that has got a performance side of it? There's more in rugby now. It's more of a social, which is important, that social bit, but you also want the extra bit on top of that, because not everybody wants the performance bit. But and the social bit's very, very important. But that performance bit, if it's there, it gives those guys another opportunity.
So there are 72 men's D1A programs in the United States.
Okay.
Having said that, and then there's D2, and then there's D4 and what used to be NESCRO, and it's kind of there's a little bit of changeover there in the organizational structure. But rugby is fairly pervasive in college campuses. But I think you hit the nail on the head in the sense that what's the differentiation between the more social sides and the more performance oriented sides? There are probably only about 16 to 20 high performance college programs in the United States. And
those universities.
Out of all those universities. And when we talk about high performance, we're talking about 4 to 5 days a week of some sort of training, whether it's 4 days a week of actual training on the pitch or training on the pitch in some sort of weight program, some sort of video analysis component. So there is a big difference there, and it comes down to university philosophy. At Lindenwood or Life or St. Mary's or Cal, the administration has made a commitment to those programs, providing and supporting those programs. It's a little bit fewer and far between for like an IU has a very successful program. That's Indiana University has a very successful program, but they're looking for donors to bring money in, like a guy like Mark Cuban who went there and played there. They're looking and trying to get money from donors like that rather than from the university in order to help their program grow and expand and become a more high performance than what they are.
I think maybe, yes, MLR, as the number of teams grow and areas where there's those universities, they potentially will start putting feelers out to those universities saying, look, we want to invite people into our academy, but first we need to sort of understand where you guys are and how we can help you. Potentially that will be a way as well, but then that's from one end, so hopefully from the other end there's also, because like everybody's saying, the game in America has got to add a bit more culture. People need to know a bit more about it and understand it a bit more, but certainly has all the athletes there, and certainly has the entertainment there for people to sort of buy into it. But let's fast forward a little bit and talk about 2031. I think that could potentially be, like you said, a Rugby World Cup here for North America.
Yeah.
If we get to that point, where would you see the whole game? If that is announced, there's a 4 of whatever amount of years leading up to that builds excitement, etc. That builds all sorts of chances for the game to sort of go and find those players and find engagement of parents, etc., etc. What can you see in 2031, for the North American game?
So if we think about 2031, we're 10 years away. At that point, the MLR will be 13, 14 years old, and it will be a more established league. I would sense that it would have more TV accessibility on mainstream TV. Obviously, that will help it grow. So I think it will be well positioned at that point, that real nice point where you're going to have a professional league that's already existed, that already has a really nice, firmly rooted infrastructure. And now it's just about growing that infrastructure to bigger and better things. I think it would be wise for whatever entity brings that to North America, brings the Rugby World Cup to North America, to use the existing rugby infrastructures in some way. So you can imagine in 10 years, you'll see teams like what's happening in Utah. They actually have a facility planned to build a new training and game facility. You're seeing in Houston with Aviva has already done that. You're seeing an OGDC has moved out to a new a new area out in Leesburg, Virginia, where they could easily work with that to create a bigger and better infrastructure. NOLA has taken over what was a baseball stadium. I can guarantee you in 10 years' time that NOLA will be a rugby-only facility with rugby training facilities around it. I hope that Chicago develops something, and there is a place to host rugby here at a 20,000 seat stadium in SeatGeek Stadium with an improvement in that facility. Could that be a really good part of the MLR infrastructure? And the part where that ties in is none of those on their own could be used as a final, but they could be used to host those tier 2 nations, pool matches, right? And strategically, you spread those matches out to those MLR cities to really enhance and grow what the league's already built upon. And then you use your crown jewels like the Coliseum or Soldier Field or something of that nature to put on your final as the creme de la creme of that Rugby World Cup North American experience. I mean, Toronto having Lamport, they need to make some improvements probably having Lamport, host. And if Vancouver gets a team down the road, you could have a brilliant, semifinal in some place like Vancouver. There's lots of potential, but I think in my mind, I think you use some of the existing MLR infrastructure to then support this beautiful, wonderful world global entity that is the Rugby World Cup.
Look, I'm hoping that. I know it's 10 years away, but all right, thanks for that. But coffee then, we spoke about it. So what do you think? How do you see coffee as part of rugby?
So I guess I'd go back to my own experience. I have a mate of mine whom we coach together at the youth level. He's a Kiwi. And we get together on occasion, and it's been difficult during COVID, but we get together on occasion on a Saturday morning and we talk life, we talk rugby, and it's all done over a cup of coffee. I'm a big fan of the story of Tom Petty, who has passed away, but Tom Petty, the musician, talked about, a wonderful cup of coffee. And what makes that cup of coffee wonderful is the experience surrounding it. It goes back to what we talked about as rugby as a game and how you can make the fan enjoy it. Well, it's all about the experience. It's where you are. It's who you're with. It's what that conversation was. It's everything that engages your senses. It's the aroma. It's the flavor. All those things for me make the experience around a cup of coffee memorable, something that I want to have as much as I can. And sometimes it's as simple as I'm going to sit down and watch a Six Nations game at 9 a.m. here in the States and sit with a cup of coffee, have my dog next to me, and just enjoy a wonderful, beautiful game. Or it's having that great conversation with a rugby mate that I haven't seen in a while and catching up over a cup of coffee. So it's all around that whole experience. And for me, it's, Rugby Coffee has changed that experience because, I was one of those guys who would every morning get a cup of coffee, put some, good, flavored creamer in it, and off I'd go to work. And this bag of Rugby Coffee, this, a crowd favorite, no flavoring necessary. A little bit of cream, a little bit of sugar, and it lives on its own flavor with its own merit. So I've really enjoyed it over the last week that I've had the crowd favorite. It's been made for great cup of coffee and some great experiences. I had one this morning, as a matter of fact, talking with some rugby mates on some business arrangements.
That's fantastic to hear. And we envisage that sort of engagement with coffee and around rugby, etc. But you have to have a good product. And like I said earlier, we are lucky to have this amazing sort of partner that just advises on this and creates a beautiful coffee. We are introducing two flavors. It's two sort of roasts. And one is the crowd favorite, which is the medium roast, and the other one is the jouet, which is play is a French sort of way. If you go anywhere where French play, or here in the UK, if you want to play a game and you just want to make the game, the ball move, etc., jouer, and jouer is a dark race, more of a flamboyant type sort of French style roast. And another nice one, and those are the two ones that we are doing here in the US and Canada for a start, and then we'll add the others as we go. So we went live yesterday with our website. Yesterday, the 20th of March, with our website in the US. So exciting times for us. And we've seen a couple of people who put their pre-order in already, which is exciting for us. And yeah, so we're looking forward to sort of get that roast done in mid-April, beginning of April, and then start sending our first ones out to those who want to try it. And obviously, people are going to help us make a difference, and that's the whole thing. That togetherness, that coffee, rugby people bringing people together. That's the big thing. Now, if I look at your podcast and where you're going, and the timing of us getting involved, and the MLR, etc., I think it's exciting from our side of things. So I want to thank the Rugby Rant for all that you guys are doing. We are very, very, grateful for what you're doing for us. And, we're looking forward to engaging with the fans and people in North America to try and do our part and together to sort of see what kind of change can we bring in kids' lives, So exciting from our side. So the brand ambassadors we've got there is DTH van der Merwe, playing for the LA Giltinis. He's a Canadian international, played 4 World Cups. He played in Glasgow, he played in Wales, and he played in Newcastle in England. Also, we have Dallin Stanford, World Rugby, World Cup commentator and 7 Series commentator and commentator MLR, etc. So, and then we're going to introduce another one this week, a young and up-and-coming player playing in the MLR, very close to what we're doing with the coffee. So we're going to announce it. So exciting times for us. So I want to give you, as a finish, I want to give you 3 words, and this is the 3-word challenge. And, the first thing that comes up, you got to shout out whatever it is,
Okay.
I'll make it easy for you, and the stuff that you probably get an answer for quite quickly. So MLR.
Exciting.
Coffee.
Oh, coffee. Comforting.
There you go. North American rugby.
Future.
Brilliant. That was brilliant. Thank you, The Hammer, Rob The Hammer Hammerschmidt, Rugby Rant Podcast. Thank you for your time, and it's really a pleasure to work with you guys, and looking forward to sending you guys your next coffee soon. And have a lovely time watching your NOLA.
Yeah. So I want to thank you for having me. I want to thank RugbyCoffee for working with us as a partner. It's a wonderful partnership, and we of course have really enjoyed it, not just because of the coffee, but because of the people involved. Similar goals, similar aspirations, similar loves and joys, and again, that makes for a wonderful shared experience. So I want to thank you guys. We're blessed to have you on board as one of our partners.
Brilliant. The Hammer, that was our longest podcast, but because it was our first video one, hopefully this one works. We are finished, and thank you for your time, and have a lovely time this afternoon. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys. Take care.